Okay, hello and welcome to now the third video on Amazon's map updates for their upcoming Lord of the Rings TV show. If you actually remember, I did predict that I would be making this video on the 6th of March, because if you remember, their first tweet was 3 rings for the elves, and then we had another tweet 3 days later, which was of course 7 rings for the dwarves, which was then 7 days later, and then their most recent tweet, 9 days ago, was 9 rings for the elves. And so today, 9 days later, we have our possibly final map. I'm not sure if it is. Of course, so now we've got 1 ring for the Dark Lord and his Dark Throne, so possibly we're gonna, by this logic, we're going to get another map tomorrow, but that is yet to be seen. But obviously, let's just start off with what we've got so far. So, kicking it off then, quickly recapping, we're just going to fly through all the maps we've had so far. Firstly, we had this one. Then we got a bunch more names. We got this one. Then 9 days ago we got this one. And now today, this is our latest map. Alright, so absolutely tons to get into in this. But where I'm going to start is just by actually making a comment on what language this map is in. This map is in the Elvish language of Sindarin. So how do we know this? Well, very simply basically, everything on this map that could possibly be in Sindarin is in Sindarin. So for example, what have we got? We've got, instead of the Grey Mountains, we've got Ered Mithrin. Instead of the Misty Mountains, we've got Ithaglir. Instead of the White Mountains, we've got Ered Nimrais. Instead of, was it Swanfleet, we've got Neen in Eilif. What else have we got? Have we got anything else knocking around? Yeah, there we go. Instead of the Tower Hills, we've got Emin Bereid. Instead of Mount Doom, we've got Arodruin. So absolutely everything on this map that could possibly be in Sindarin is in Sindarin. So this is an Elvish map of Middle-earth. So what does that mean then? What does that imply? We could take that possibly to mean that this TV series may well be focused and centred around the elves if we are being given an Elvish map of Middle-earth here. That is not certainly anything that is too unreasonable to suggest. Okay, so kicking it off then, we're going to start off by looking at Lond Dea, which I may or may not be pronouncing correctly. But this place was the first permanent settlement of the Númenóreans on Middle-earth. So when they first arrived here, this was the first port they made. It was called New Haven. So this was created and this was founded somewhere between 750 to 800 in the Second Age. But by the time of the near the end of the Second Age, because of the ruin of Númenor, by 3319 of the Second Age, this place was basically completely ruined, completely destroyed. So you would think that this would suggest, therefore, that the TV series is unlikely to be set in, say, the Third Age, because this location essentially was just a ruin by that point. But there is some evidence to contradict that. We'll get onto that later. But what we're going to look at now then is actually Barad-dûr. So Barad-dûr, for the first time, I think it's the first time, has been labelled, and of course that was only constructed in 1600 of the Second Age, so we know it has to be after that. We also have Pelargir. That was constructed in 2350 of the Second Age, so it has to be after that. We also, most interestingly here, have Minas Ithil and Minas Anor. Minas Anor, of course, became eventually known as Minas Tirith, and Minas Ithil, of course, eventually became known as Minas Morgul. But it wasn't until the year 2000 in the Third Age that Minas Ithil became Minas Morgul and Minas Tirith became Minas Tirith. So of course Minas Ithil became Minas Morgul after it was besieged and eventually conquered by the forces of evil and the Nazgul. Before that, their names were essentially pairs. So Minas Anor meant the Tower of the Setting Sun, while Minas Ithil meant the Tower of the Rising Moon. Of course, when this almost pairing of names was broken, that is when Minas Tirith decided to rename itself to the Tower of the Guard or the Tower of the Watch. So what this tells us is that this TV show has to take place between 3320 of the Second Age and 2000 of the Third Age. Because, of course, we know it has to take place after the construction of Minas Ithil and before its renaming to Minas Morgul. Alright then, so let's zoom off to another location. And we're going to zoom off actually to two more locations built in the same year as Minas Ithil. The first is Fornost, and this became the capital of the northern kingdom of men in Arnor. And in addition to that, we also have Annuminas, which is also constructed in 3320 of the Second Age. So again, this just further confirms that this TV show has to be set nearer the end of the Second Age in the final 120-something years or so. So in addition to this as well, both Fornost and Annuminas were essentially left in ruin following the war between the northern kingdoms of men and the forces of Angmar, of course led by the fearsome Witch King. So these wars raged actually between the years of 1300 in the Third Age up until 1975 in the Third Age, wherein the armies of Angmar were finally defeated, but not before the deaths of several northern kings and also the destruction of several northern beautiful cities of men. A few other little areas, so you've also got Morthond, also known as the Blackroot Vale. That is interestingly where the king of the mountain swore fealty to the king of Gondor and pledged that he would fight for Gondor in their time of need, which of course, of course that's the same king that we see in Return of the King that comes and fights for Aragorn and company. And so the fact that that's labelled possibly indicates that we might get to see when that happens, although that is in the Second Age, that is in 3429 of the Second Age. So it's possible we'll see that too. We've also got listed Nin in Eilf, and that was actually an area, also known as Swampfleet, where the stores, a type of hobbit, such as Smeagol was a store, and they used to live there. So we have the stores used to live there. We also have the Gladden River labelled, which is also where the stores lived. So it's possible that if we're going to see some hobbit action, that sounded weird, if we're going to see some hobbits knocking around, I reckon we might be seeing the stores mainly, because we've got two areas where that, would you say breed? That breed of hobbit, I suppose, lived. What else have we got to talk about? Yeah, okay, we could also, on that same sort of vein, also mention the fact that, of course, the Shire isn't labelled here. The reason the Shire isn't labelled here is because the Shire doesn't exist until 1601 of the Third Age. So until we get to that point, we're not going to see the Shire. And of course, we know we could actually reach that point. The Shire actually is within our range, because as we said, it will be at least up until 2000 of the Third Age. That is essentially the end of our range. So just to kind of sum up then, I don't really have too much time to be making this video. This one's been a bit of a rush. But to sum up, we know that it has to take place between these years, between 3320 of the Second Age and 2000 of the Third Age. So things happen between that. Of course, we have, right at the start of that, we have the construction of Minas Ithil and construction of northern cities. We have the Battle of the Last Alliance and the downfall of Sauron. We have the birth of Arwen, the Eastling invasions in the 5th and 6th century of the Third Age. We have the massive long war between Angmar and Arnor for several hundred years in the Third Age, and of course then we eventually have the conquering of Minas Ithil by the forces of evil right at the end of that range. I think there are two possibilities of when this TV show is going to be set. I don't think there's any other possibility really. I think number one, very highly likely, is the sort of the build towards the Battle of the Last Alliance. I think that's got a very good chance, because mainly, if they are going to call it The Lord of the Rings, if they are going to call it that, it would make the most sense for it to at least highly involve Sauron, I suppose, if that makes sense. Of course, it wouldn't still be the actual story of The Lord of the Rings books or anything, but it would at least involve The Lord of the Rings. Second most likely, I believe, is the battles between Angmar and Arnor, because the Witch King is such an iconic figure. I think that'd be fantastic to see. I think that would be quite an awesome little section of Middle-earth history to look at as well. So, wrapping up there then. Hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry this one was a little bit rushed. Sorry if any of it didn't make too much sense. But yeah, we'll see if they release any more information. Otherwise, I don't know whether it'll be a few more months or maybe another year before we get a trailer or anything. We'll see. But thank you for watching all the way to the end of this video. Goodbye.